Hey everyone, good evening. Actually, it's evening now. I'm just taking a break from cleaning and baking and stuff. I thought I would make a quick video since it is a new moon tonight, a new moon in Sagittarius. And this new moon is gonna allow you to let go. My cat's eating weird things. Allow you to kind of let go of things that you've been really hanging on to in the last little while, maybe the last few years or something, and that you just really, it's time to let them go and release it. Whether they are things that no longer serve you, or just some like fear and other blockages that have really been holding you back all this time. And so tonight's message that I want to give is about fear-based living and about vulnerability and what it means to be vulnerable. So, where do I begin? Most people are living on fear-based choices and actions and thinking and reaction and all that. And what does that mean? Well, it just means that you're not choosing things from your heart center. You're not choosing things that are in alignment with you and what your soul wants. It means that you're choosing based on fear and any kind of shame you have within. And so you're allowing your sub-personality to make the various sub-personalities within you to make these choices for you, choices that will keep you comfortable, safe, or what you think is safe, easy, things without risk, things that might appease your immediate satisfactions and ego and your true soul calling and wants and needs are actually being completely ignored. And as I posted earlier on my Facebook page, they get like shoved into the dungeon and they are never to be seen again. So how do you stop that from happening? And why is that happening, first of all? So, okay, well, society plays a huge role in that, but a lot of that stems from our childhood and what happened to us growing up, whether we had parents who were unable to give us unconditional love or nurture us the way that we're meant to be nurtured as children. And so we didn't develop those skills, the skills to fulfill our needs, because our needs were not fulfilled as they should have been. So we do not know how to fulfill our needs. And so this is why we end up seeking fulfillment outwardly through material possessions or what societal norms should be and things like that. So and ultimately none of those things are fulfilling, as you will soon figure out if you haven't already by now. So what can you do about that? Well, for starters, you can start healing your wounds. Figure out what those are. Like those, one of the easiest ways to figure out what wounds are is when things trigger you. So if there's something that upsets you, someone does something or says something, or an event happens and it triggers you. What I mean by trigger, because I mean people throw that around all the time now on social media, and it's like, oh, you're so triggered. But what it actually means is that it's triggering some kind of an emotional response from you. So if someone says something or does something and it triggers and elicits some type of emotional or unfavorable emotional response from you, then that means that it's triggering you. And what that is actually, you can use that as a flashlight that's pointing exactly like where the wound is. You can find where the wound is. So you can use that as your guidance, like a guidance tool. It's actually really helpful. Once you can get over getting pissed off at someone for saying something that like completely threw you off. But when you can get to a point and be like, okay, hold on. Why is this bothering me so much that this person said this or did this? Like, why am I reacting this way to that person? When you can get to a place where you can analyze why you are reacting to something that someone did or said, then you can move forward now and figure out what the wound is. And you can do that with yourself with meditation. I do highly recommend seeing a psychotherapist, a therapist of some sort. Psychotherapists deal primarily with going deep into all of those things and you're healing your wounds and things like that. So I do recommend a psychotherapist. Going to see like different healers and things like that are really good too. But you want to uncover all the wounds, and speaking to a trained professional will help you with that. But in the meantime, what you can do on your own is you can journal. Try to uncover what you think that initial reaction is from. Like, what was the initial thing that made it? Could have been something that happened when you were 5. Maybe someone treated you poorly. Maybe you didn't have someone stand up for you. Maybe you had someone say something horribly to you. Maybe something happened with a parent, or it could be like so many different things. But you have to remember that when something happens to a child who's 5 and they don't have the capacity to deal with that incident, and if you don't have a parent or a caregiver who can assist you during that moment, whether it's with compassion and care and give you nurturing and fulfilling your needs in that moment when you experience that kind of trauma. And it doesn't matter if it's a small trauma or a huge trauma. When you are experiencing a certain trauma and you do not have somebody who can help you with that when you're a child, that's when wounds are created. So the child doesn't know how to deal with it. You don't know. When you're 4, when you're 3, when you're 5, you don't know these things. You don't know how to deal with emotions or trauma happening to you. So you end up storing that. So what happens is that 5-year-old you gets a huge ball of emotion, and because everything is energy, right? So it's going to take that and store it somewhere in your body. It's going to bury it so that it can survive. And what I mean by that is that they're having like an emotional meltdown internally because of this trauma that they just like experienced. They don't know how to deal with it, so they have to bury it and put it away in order to continue on, since they don't know how to deal with it. And they were never taught how to deal with it, and they weren't nurtured or cared for. So that thing will stay there forever and fester. And when they're small, it'll just stay forever. And then eventually they'll come out when you're older. And you'll continue to do this when you're growing up. You'll continue to store things away and bury it and never deal with any of your shit because you've never taught to. So it's not your fault. But it is your fault when you're an adult now. And now you're refusing to deal with it. So as an adult, we have to take responsibility. We may not have been responsible for what happened to us when we were younger, but now as adults, we are responsible for what we do with what we have now. So that's our responsibility. It's on us. So that will eventually show up. And when it's time, when your guide, your higher self knows that it's ready for you and you're capable of dealing with it, and when it's time for you to deal with this because it needs to be removed because it's hindering you from following your path, then it'll come up again. So using what triggered you in the present tense can point towards that initial wound that happened when you were younger, and you can heal that wound. How do you heal that wound? By doing inner child work. Inner child work means that you meditate and go into meditation. You meet with your child self. So you can meet with your 5-year-old self, that experience, that situation, and you give them that care that they needed at that point when they were 5 that they didn't receive. So you talk to yourself, look at like as if you are standing right there in front of yourself, but a 5-year-old version of yourself, and think about like how much compassion and love you will give that 5-year-old version of yourself, because they didn't receive it at the time. So now you're fully capable of doing that. So it's called inner child work. You're going to reparent that child, and what you're going to do is you're going to give that child, you're going to nurture it and give it everything it needs to fulfill its needs. So you're going to hug it, you're going to talk to it, you're going to ask your inner child what it needs, and you're going to give it to that child depending on what it is. So that's one of the ways you can do that. So so fear and vulnerability, back to that. So when we have all these wounds and stuff inside of us, all these subpersonalities like end up coming out, and they basically exist in order to protect our internal true self. They're trying to protect it. So now it's like on lockdown. It's basically on lockdown. You cannot get to your true self. It's completely blocked, depending on how bad the trauma is, or how bad you just emotionally were unable to emotionally process that. And some people are too afraid to be vulnerable. Their subpersonalities will not allow them to go there. They are too scared. They're too scared. They have too much pain dealing with that, depending on what the trauma is. They can go their whole lifetime like not going there and ignoring it. And it's incredibly sad, because the true self, the true being of that person, will constantly be yearning to be seen and be heard and be allowed to exist how it wants to. But it won't, because all these subpersonalities will take over, and like the rebel or the addict and all these various subpersonalities, and they'll hijack everything, and they'll be like doing all these things that they feel like are the best thing for them, while totally shoving the inner self into the inner being into the dungeon and ignoring it and not allowing it to ever come out, and saying, we know what's best for you, you're never coming out, get out, like stay in there. But then there's like resentment and sadness and all these like heavy feelings that will like start to arise as you get older, and it'll be unbearable. And I think that's probably why a lot of people have a midlife crisis when you get to that point, because they haven't done any of that healing, and their true being isn't, unless you can express your true self, you will not have the capacity to feel joy, because it is only there that you can feel true joy. Through your inner child holds those emotions, and your inner child exists within your inner being. So that's why we go with midlife crisis and go buy like a convertible and all these crazy things, because they're trying to do something to make themselves happy, because they feel like this pit of unhappiness inside. And those are the people that like dread when they get older and things like that, and they feel so much unhappiness. It's because they don't feel happy, because they're not allowing their true self to exist. They're not allowing them to even be present, to take up space. And the reality is that most people aren't even aware of this. So I'm just making this video hoping that I can shed some light on this, on the reasons why people have so much unhappiness, and the role that vulnerability plays in this. So being vulnerable means that you can move those subpersonalities out of the way and allow space for your true self to come out. And you can obviously only do that in places that are safe. So with your therapist will always be a safe place to do that. It's the best place to be that person, because it's always going to be a safe place with your therapist. Cultivating relationships where people can have unconditional love for you, and they care for you and support you. And that will mean having to eliminate people from your life who are toxic and who secretly are rooting against you and not for you. There's people that pretend that they're in your corner, but they're not. They're only in your corner as long as you fit into their box. If they don't fit into their box, then they're not in your corner anymore. So you have to be really careful with your friendships and who you allow yourself to be vulnerable with, because sometimes you can be vulnerable with people and they will use that against you. So you might find that you will have to withdraw. Allowing yourself to be vulnerable with yourself is important. So being your true self when you're alone is a start. Some people don't even know how to do that. So you have to know who your true self is to begin with. So start to do things that are creative, whether it's writing, and something that you're really good at, that you enjoy. And it can be, writing for some of you. It could be painting. It could be singing. It could be dancing. Anything that's creative. When I say creative, I don't mean artistic. Creative means creating something, the act of creation. So that means that anything that you create, whether it's cooking, building things, writing math equations, something that you create that you really are passionate about. Everybody will have something that they're really good at. They're naturally good at it and they enjoy it. So do that. Spend some time alone and do some of that. Be very introspective and allow yourself to be vulnerable with yourself. And that will help you to kind of start to break the barrier, because you need to find out who you are. And then you can try to find the people in your life who you can be vulnerable with. And like I said, might not be anyone for the first little while. You might find that all the people in your life aren't people that you can be vulnerable with. Maybe even your family you can be vulnerable with if you grew up in a family with enmeshment, and everyone's decisions are based on everyone else's decisions, and you're all very tight-knit like that. That's maybe not a very safe place for you to be vulnerable, because they will most definitely use that against you, and that will not be a safe space for you. So please don't try that out. And what else? Once you start to be vulnerable and you can allow your true self to come out, then you're going to start making choices that are love-based. They're not fear-based. And when you're making choices that are love-based, you will feel happier, and it'll give you fulfillment, because you're doing and giving yourself what you need and what you want, what you crave, what your soul is asking for, and what it desires and longs for. And that is how you bring joy. But in order to get there, you have to do the healing, you have to do the work, and you have to get into the wounds, and that's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel shitty. You're going to have to experience those shitty feelings you felt when you were 5 and that thing happened to you that made you really upset. And that in itself is what growing is. Growing can be incredibly painful and heavy, but it is so worth it when you get over that, because the release of that is incredibly rewarding, and you get to reclaim all those pieces of you that you lost. Because as a child, we're born as this perfect being, and we're so excited, and we love all these things, and we are living our true selves when we are children. When we're kids, we are living our true selves, and then eventually, because of trauma from our upbringing or things that happen to us, all these layers get put on us, and we get covered. We get covered, and we're no longer living our true self. We're not bringing our inner being forward anymore. It's been locked into the dungeon, and we are now operating from fear-based, not allowing any vulnerability to exist, which brings us sadness and a very cloudy aura, and just all kinds of bad things, blocked energies. So you can take this opportunity on the new moon right now to write down intentions of things you want to do. Manifesting is a great tool to start your healing journey if you choose to. What you can do is, by writing down things that you let go, that you no longer, things that no longer serve you. You can write them down on a paper and say, like, for instance, I let go of wanting to be in control, or I let go of things that aren't for me. And just write them down. And then you can set an intention list of things that I want. I invite healing into my life. I invite wholesome love into my life. You can write your intention list and things that you release and let go. And then you can start doing the work. And once you set those intentions with the universe will send you things in your life that will be paired up with what you want towards your healing journey. It'll send you things that'll be in alignment with you. For instance, if you need healers will show up in your life, and you will be guided and directed in that direction. That's the wonderful thing about the universe. It really does work that way. Take it from me. I was one of those people a long time ago who was not into any of this stuff, and I started, testing it out, and it actually is really quite remarkable how that works, and the power of our thoughts and intentions and desires, as long as we remove the obstacles from within and outside of us. And the major ones from inside are our feelings of self-worth and our self-love and things like that. So we need to be able to remove those feelings of unworthiness in order to want to manifest. So anyways, in conclusion, I know this video is all over the place. In conclusion, we have so many people that are making fear-based decisions and living from a fear-based place right now, and not living from their heart center. Their heart chakra is completely closed. And when you just start to live from, like, when you start to be vulnerable and allowing yourself to be vulnerable, which is not something that is weak, or like, you're not some, like, I don't want to be like really rude, but anyways, you're not less than when you're vulnerable. It's actually incredibly, like, you are an incredibly strong person if you can be vulnerable, because it takes some friggin' courage and bravery to be able to be vulnerable, and especially in today's world, because to be real, to be authentically you and bring that forward. And like I said, you have to be careful. Like, you don't want to bring that places where it's not good to be that way. For instance, I'll give you an example. I've constantly tried to be authentic and bring my authentic self to my workplace. And I used to be able to do that a long time ago when my workplace was a very different place back then. But now it's not like that at all. It's incredibly, like, greedy and toxic, and just a very toxic environment. And I was trying to be vulnerable and bring my authentic true self into this environment, and I just kept getting really hurt there. So I had to stop that, because I learned that you can't always bring your authentic self to the playground. Sometimes when there's a bunch of bullies and nasty people, you need to protect that and not bring that part of you out, only to people that are deserving of that. So you will start to attract attract those people into your life, and and the rest is history. You'll see what I mean once you start doing it. If you have any questions, you can message me below. And I was gonna say, so vulnerability is something really strong and courageous and brave to do. So don't let anyone tell you differently. Okay, so enough about that. So I'm gonna do a card pull on I have these Dorian Virtue, this is backwards video, Magical Unicorn Oracle cards. So I'm gonna do a quick card for today's let's do a quick card pull for today's energy. Why not? Might as well do something new in my video. Excuse me. It's like drying. It's dry in my apartment, so. Okay. So we'll do a quick card pull for today's energy. And 1 second. It's like one flying over here, so I'm gonna grab it. Got it. Okay. So the card I picked out is water. It's backwards. It says drink more water and eat foods with water in them, such as fresh fruits and vegetables. So this is a good card. Like this cat fur everywhere. So this is a good card because if you're doing like a lot of healing and stuff like that, because you're releasing a lot of energy and stuff, and with the new moon and stuff like that, you want to drink a lot of water, because when you're having energy like moving in and out of you, being hydrated will help the process. Think of it as like having the channel clear. When you have this nice streams, the energy can flow more freely in and out of you. But if you're dehydrated, it's not as good. So make sure you drink lots of water while you're doing lots of healing. You will see that it'll make a difference. And so yeah, that's the message for today, is water. Anyways, I love these cards. I hope you have a good day. If you have any questions, or if there's any other topics that you want to talk about, feel free to comment below. If you want a Reiki appointment or a card reading, feel free to message me as well. Anyways, hope you have a beautiful night.